Well, thank you for being here today, and just really excited to share with you some things in a series I'm calling Vision 2016 that I think will hopefully kind of be a blessing and an encouragement to you in your, not only as I share some of the stories of our church, but I think as we look forward into the story that God hasn't written yet, that 2016 that He's writing with us as we speak, that I'm just excited to see what the next chapter holds, and I want to talk to you about, for today, I want to talk to you about where we've been. Okay, when you talk about vision for the future, sometimes you gotta pass on some stories from the past, and I want to tell you this morning the story of our church. All right. You know what? Let me push pause real quick and ask a question about that, because it is the heat. I forgot this until this moment right now. The heater. I came over this morning and the heater is not working back there, Elizabeth. The kids, what do you think? I'm going to tell stories this morning. You want me to leave them in here? It's up to you. It really is. I'll dance around and keep their attention if you want to. No, okay. Everybody's like, we're all leaving now. Yeah. If Darrell's dancing, we're all leaving. Yes. What? We will have next. Yeah. I walked in this morning. I don't know if it has to do with the power loss or something over the last weekend, but walked in this morning and there's no heat in the back section. So we're getting that figured out, but we will get it figured out. But okay, so that's where we stand. I want to tell you this morning the story of our church. I know that for those who are with us by video in Clovis, New Mexico, and in Zanesville, Ohio, a couple of the churches that I preach at there, that this won't be your story, but it's our story, and I hope that it'll be something that is a blessing and encouragement to your heart. I'm going to start the story of our church, not really with the very beginning of our church. I'm going to start it from when I came, and that's the reason for that is not so much because that I'm the beginning of everything. It's more like that's the part of the story I know the best. Okay, and so this story begins in June of 2003. In June of 2003, my wife and I felt specifically called, actually really in February and March and April, we felt specifically called that God was calling us to move to Oklahoma City. And I'll tell you the truth, when I came out here in February of 2003 to preach a weekend meeting 2 or 3 times, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then travel back to Kentucky, I took a little break, and my new wife and I, we'd been married about 7 months, I guess, something like that. We traveled out here, and I expected, just me, I expected to come to Oklahoma City and find out why I wasn't moving to Oklahoma City. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you have this idea of what God's going to do. You kind of have this, But Brother Virgil Tyler had contacted me and asked if I could come out and preach and do a trial sermon weekend here. And so I came out and preached the weekend and just fell in love with the people here. And I drove away on a Sunday night in a white Ford Taurus, cruising down the interstate and heading back to Kentucky. And as I cruised down I-44, talking with my wife, talking over the weekend, I said, you know what, I feel like maybe this is it. We spent a couple of weeks praying about it, and both felt just confirmed this was it. And so in June the 21st or something like that of 2003, we loaded up all of the stuff that we had moved into a house that we had bought and remodeled when we got married. We fixed it up just like we wanted it, and my wife cried the day we left. Because it was our baby, we had fixed that house just like we wanted it, and But it wasn't just a sad cry only. It was like, well, this is sentimental, but we're moving on to something next. So what's next? And so we arrived. We pulled up right out here with a 24-foot budget truck towing our car along behind, and people started streaming out of the house because they were doing the last-minute painting and fixing things up, and people started coming out of the house and coming out of the woodwork, and we started carrying things inside. At the end of that day, we got done and we moved. We took the moving truck back and we went to eat at a Brahms for the very first time. Not the first time for her, the first time for me, because she's from Kansas and Midwest and all that. But so we came to Brahms and we sat down at Brahms and had something to eat. And while I was there, a homeless man came in and I watched him steal a carton of something and slide it inside his clothing. And welcome to Southside. That's what that's how we roll, right? First day on the job. All right. About a month and a half, about a month later, month and a week maybe, we discovered that we were going to be adding a third person to our house. And about that same time, roughly right in there somewhere, we had this little gathering right here. This is August the 2nd, 2003. It is my birthday, actually. It's a Sunday night, and we all went over to our house for some ice cream and cake and whatever after the evening service. Meanwhile, took that picture right there, asked everybody to come outside and I could take the picture. So that's about a month that we'd been here about a month. I don't know if you see Jamin and Eric right there on the front or not, but that's classic right there. In fact, there's our pastor installation service with Walt Hedstrom, our denominational leader, a few years ago, and a few years and a few pounds ago as well. I've added on a little bit since that time. There's Jamin and Eric. That's our youth leadership team. They're fighting there. Some things don't change, but we fell in love with the people here. We started getting to know people and drawing closer to them and having a good time together. And you know what? We started working. We really did. The first month, that June and July of that year, we averaged, I think maybe August as well, we averaged 20 for that first month. And we started working. We started going out and knocking on doors and passing out postcards. And somewhere in all that mix was when I knocked on Maria's door for the very first time, as we were talking about. She was talking about a little bit ago, and the things started moving in the right direction. There's a picture that's Virgil Tyler teaching Sunday school right there back a long time ago, and that's actually the only reason the crowd is so big there that day is because my family's there. That's my mom and dad and brother and sister sitting kind of in the middle there, and it was. We used to have a guy came to church here. He'd say, "Well, it looks like Slim Pickens this morning," and it pretty much was. I remember writing in my journal, I was just out of my mind excited. We had 35 on Sunday morning. Oh, it was amazing. And like, whoa, 35. Oh my goodness. I also remember some frustrating, discouraging days where you do your best and you call everybody and you knock on doors and I think there were 29 people outside of the regulars that attended. I think 29 people said they were going to come that next Sunday. Yeah, we'll be there. Absolutely, we'll be there. And 2 came. And I wrote in my journal, I was like, 29 said they'd come and only 2 came. I also remember the day that we broke our attendance record and we hit 53, and the Saturday before that, I was so discouraged because nobody was coming. Nobody. Everybody's like, I'm sorry I can't make it. I'm out of town. Well, I'm sorry, we got a T-ball tournament tomorrow. I'm sorry we can't. And that day we broke our attendance record, and I was just, 53. I was just topping the trees, man. About the end of the first year, Well, let me just say. Oh, I've got another picture here. This is back in the. We had a little trailer next door. Maybe you've heard of Bread of Life Pantry. We had a little trailer next door, and we used to do junior church in there. We had it for a while. It was storage, and then we cleaned everything out and set it up. And there's Elizabeth teaching a bunch of kids. We started picking up kids in our cars. Honestly, it would be a lot of times I have gone in and woke people up and got them out of their beds and helped them pull on shoes and get in the car to come to church. Because that's the way it rolled in those days. It was just like, in fact, I would often carry 2 loads. There's times where I've dropped off a load of kids and people at our church, dropped off a carload, and only people here were the Tylers and those kids, and they ran wild, and the Tylers tried to contain them while I drove off and got another carload and brought them back. That's just how we went. It was busy, hard-working days. But you know what? It started happening. That you can see we were right there around the 20-25 mark right there at the beginning, and then it started kind of just gradually increasing, and then I think that was, I'm not sure if that was Easter, that last jump there on all of a sudden, man, things just took off. About just right before the big upswing at the end right there, right before that, some controversy kind of erupted. And the reason I share this story with you is because you look back, have you ever looked back at your life and realized later that there were moments that really impacted your DNA, like who you are, your identity? There was some controversy and some challenges that kind of erupted at the end of that first year, and about 12 or 13 people decided they needed to go to a different church, and the statement that the frustrations and things had kind of gotten to a peak point with them, and the statement that got back to me at that time, they never said it to me, but the statement that got back to me that they said to somebody else was, "These kind of people don't pay the bills." And that became a defining moment for our church. Because I don't know about you, but I always thought the wrong kind of people were the right kind of people. If you know what I'm saying. Right? Like the people that aren't the right kind of people that mess up the seats that they're sitting on, and that don't smell right, and don't have the right amount of money, and can't pay the bills, and have issues, and sometimes are a little bit high in church. Those kind of people are the kind of people that need what we're talking about. Am I right? Yeah. And it became this defining moment. I remember some really, really sober leadership meetings. I mean, the board got together, and I remember saying, look, let me just define reality for you here. 50% of our tithe income just left the church. We actually, the first 12 months, that 12 months right there, we went in debt $10,000 for operating expenses. Our debt went up from $70,000 to $80,000 in that 12 months right there. Now, I don't know about you, but when you go in debt $10,000 for a year, and then half of your income decides to go to a different place, and those people, I love them and care about them and wish them all the best, but it was who we were, and we had to struggle through who we were and what kind of church we were going to be. Whether we were going to reach people that lived here, or whether we were going to wish for a different kind of people that didn't live here. And it was sober, difficult board meetings. Some hard moments there where we had to decide, and I remember the treasurer coming to me in those days and saying, listen, the bills are all paid, but don't spend any money. Because there's $200 in the church checking account. It was some challenging days. I remember trying to go and like getting board approval to buy toilet paper for the church. I mean, it was a really, like, okay, guys, all in favor, say aye, to awkward sort of conversations, but that's where we were. That's who we were. About the end of that first year, things started taking off, and a number of new families got connected and plugged in, and there was a moment where a lady started coming to church, and she said that she just seemed like she was growing in the Lord and moving toward God. She had several kids. She brought them with her, and she brought some of her other family with her, and it was really fantastic. And she would call me, like I remember preaching on forgiveness one Sunday, talking about forgiving others, and she called me that afternoon and said, I just called my dad and made up with him, and I haven't spoken to him in like 5 years. And I just asked him to forgive me and told him I forgive him, and I was like, man, this is fantastic. Well, this is beautiful. And she said, is there any chance that the church would like to start a food pantry? And I said, yeah, you're it. Let's go. In case you're wondering, this isn't Ruth, okay? All right, this is not. So some of you are wondering if that's who I'm talking about. It's not Ruth. This is pre-Ruth. All right. She said, well, I'm gonna put some things together, and man, she was a whirlwind of activity. She called people and got donated lumber and got stuff. We cleaned out this room up here, and we were going to put the pantry in that room, and she called store owners and got people to donate stuff, and I mean, it was happening, man. She set up a website, and she called it Love Thy Neighbor Food Pantry, and about that time. In this whole process, something happened in me spiritually that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment. But about this time, there was some sort of turn that happened in me spiritually. Things were going well. Like attendance was up. I remember the Sunday we had 68. And I was like, yeah, 68, man, we're blowing the doors off here. 69 the next Sunday. Oh, yes. Thank you, Jesus. 74 the next Sunday. Oh, it is happening, y'all. This is happening. We better start planning to buy a new building, you know. In those days, I was kind of really stats obsessed, and I had like averages and, you know, all this kind of stuff. Now, the next thing that happened was somewhere in there, I lost focus. Somewhere in that upswing, something happened right here. And I lost my focus on Jesus. I lost my focus on walking carefully with Him. I got involved in lust and internet pornography and things like that. And I'm not proud of that or bragging about that. It's the story. It's the story of what happened. After this little thing happened right there, after this upswing, in fact, that's one of those Sundays. That's one of the Sundays right there in that section of time where we had about 69 people, 74 people, something like that, and I was just topping the trees, man. You see people there that you recognize. I see Christy and Liz and others. It was happening. I got a call one day from the lady that had wanted to start the food pantry. And she said, I want you to pick up this stuff, and we picked up this food and got it all in here. The next Sunday, she wasn't there. And I was kind of like, okay, well, wonder where Robin is today. And the next Sunday after that, I called that week and left a voicemail and didn't hear back from her. The next Sunday she wasn't there. And I was like, okay, wonder what's going on. I went by and visited and knocked on the door, and she was there, and she said, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling well, and so I just wasn't able to make it. And I said, okay, well, we'll see you next week, I guess. Literally, I never saw her again from that day forward. I found out later that she struggled with manic depressive disorder, bipolar sort of thing, and she was up for those few number of weeks and months right before that. She was up, and now she was not up, and she disappeared. In fact, she divorced her husband, moved out, went, and it was like in a matter of just a few weeks. And I was kind of blown away by all this. And in the process, there was this thing going on in me spiritually where, by the way, things like this never happen instantly, do they? They never happen instantly. You kind of gradually lose focus. You kind of drift without realizing it, and you wind up way over here, and you're like, what happened? How did I get here? And just it gradually happened. And I don't really know exactly when, but this has blown me away many times. I can see it looking back. I can see it in the statistics. You can see, starting there at the beginning, how things took off, and then you can see how things leveled off. And you can see we grew exactly like a bar of soap for the next 3 years. You ever noticed how a bar of soap grows? Yeah. That was us. It was just really slow, almost imperceptible, but over the course of time. And I remember this being a dark time for me, discouraging and frustrating and aggravating, where I felt like, I wanted to do right, and yet there was this pull and this... Because, by the way, if you put sin in your life in a dark corner and don't talk to anyone about it, it doesn't lose its power, it grows in power. Okay, whether it's addiction or whether it's anything else, whatever it is, if you just shove it back in a dark corner and you don't deal with it, if you don't bring it out into the light, if you don't tell someone, if you don't confess and push it out in the light, it just grows in power. It doesn't die. Somewhere toward the end of that downward slip right there, about 2/3 of the way through that gradual downward decrease, I got really frustrated and discouraged and said, you know what? This is stupid. I've got to get real and get honest and tell people about what's going on. So I did. I told a friend. I told my wife. There were hard days there. Hard days. Difficult moments where it's not easy to admit that you're wrong. It's not easy to say, I've been in sin. It's not easy to say, I can't help this. I've got to have help. I need help. It's not easy to do that. It's hard, difficult days in there. In fact, I remember one Sunday, or no, it wasn't a Sunday, I think it was a Thursday. One Thursday, I had decided I'm going to fast and pray. Maybe that's what it is. I need to fast and pray and just tell the Lord that He's got to do something and He's got to grow this church. And I had 5 goals that I wrote down on a piece of paper, and I said I'm going to go on a 40-day fast of lunch. Every single day I'm going to fast lunch. And about halfway through that 40-day fast of lunch, I was more discouraged and frustrated than ever. It was just like, I don't know what, because it seemed like God was taking all my little 5 goals that I had written down on that paper and just pushing them aside and saying, this 40 days is not about that. This 40 days is about you. And I remember just being frustrated and aggravated and looking. I read the Bible and I'm like, I see where these people live and how and what they have, and I'm not living there. I don't have that. And I walked into my office, literally I walked into my office and my eyes fell on that section of my bookshelf right there. I was walking by and my eyes just dropped down to that part of my bookshelf. And it was almost like one book, a book called Holiness and Power by A.M. Hills, was almost highlighted to me on that shelf. It was like my eyes hit that book and it was like, that one. And I said, Lord, that's it. Actually, scratch that. First, God said to me, that's it, right there. That's it. You don't have holiness and you don't have power. And I'm like, yeah, what? Exactly. I didn't do another thing that day. I pulled the book off the shelf. I came up and I think I sat down in the front seat here, opened that book and just started reading. And I read for 3 or 4 hours, just soaking in and like saying, Lord, okay, talk to me. If I don't have this, and God started this deep digging out work in my life. This fundamental, powerful thing that He started doing inside me and taking me on this journey to a place where, by God's grace, I can say I'm full of the Holy Spirit now. At that time, I could not say that. I went into a season where it was still, honestly, it was still dark. You never notice that sometimes when you turn back toward the Lord, things don't immediately get bright and happy. Oh, yeah. So, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you still go through this dark time where you feel like you're navigating in the dark and it was a challenging time. In fact, you can see right there, notice the statistics. I don't even have them from that period. Like the next 9 months, I don't have anything. I have nothing at all that I can find about attendance in those days. In fact, I just kind of forgot it and just passed it aside. But in that process, in that time, our church kind of got desperate about praying. In fact, in that time, in that gap, that dip right there where there's no statistics at all, we had a prayer revival. Some of you guys may remember that. We had this time where instead of calling in a special speaker and doing like a series of meetings where a special speaker preaches, we just got together and prayed. We didn't do anything else. We just got together, we'd sing a song, we'd pray, maybe sing another song and pray some more. And for about an hour from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we prayed every single night of the week that week. Something happened. The spiritual temperature began to change in our church. There was a turn. There was a just as surely as there had been a turn before, there was another turn that happened. And I can't prove it to you stats wise, but something began to happen and God began to I'll show you in a minute. You'll see it later on. But God began to work in our church, and we began to see people start coming back, and we began to see the work of God being done, and people started moving toward the Lord, and things started happening, and we started making contacts. And in the middle of all this, I felt like God took away from me the ability to have vision for our church. You know what I'm talking about, vision, right? Like a plan for the future and a picture of where we're going. I felt like I didn't have that, which was totally weird for me because there's never been a time in my life I didn't feel like I had the ability to have vision. I've always been a future person, and you ask me, what do you think we ought to do? I'm going to give you 5 goals like right now. I think we ought to do this and this and this and this and this. That's me. It's just who I am. But I could not do that in those days. But I remember it, seriously, I remember it as clearly as anything. There was this moment where on a Sunday afternoon, all of a sudden, after 3 or 4 years of not being able to do that, God gave it back to me I remember the hours, like 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. And all of a sudden, I had this, I grabbed a pen, I grabbed a piece of paper, and I just started writing down, and God said, these are goals that I want you to chase after. I just started writing, and it's like it came back to me all of a sudden. What was God doing? I don't know altogether. I just know this, that in the process of getting distracted, I forgot integrity, and I walked away from careful obedience to the Lord, and then I began chasing after God again, and there was this desire for God's holiness and His power again. And as a church, we started seeking, and there was a dark, difficult moments in there, but you know what? There came a moment where the light started breaking through, and things started happening and moving forward again. In that time frame, right after all that happened, God gave us as a church board, we worked through a process, and God gave us a new mission statement. And the new mission statement is this one right here, and that is, our church exists to help people love God, love others, and serve the world. We want you to climb that mountain right there. That's why you're here, all right? We want you to learn to love God, we want you to learn to love others, and we want you to serve the world, to serve in a ministry. Use the gifts and things that God gives to you to bless the world around you. And so we begin working through that process and talking about it. And by the way, this is what I'm going to be talking about for the next couple of weeks, all right? I want to tell you about love God, love others, serve the world, and how you fit into that story and what God's going to do in our city through that process right there. God began to continue to bless. That's a couple of years ago right there. There's the turn that I talked about. You can see where suddenly things jumped up, and over the course of time, God has continued to grow our church, and we're continuing to make progress. And by God's grace, If you draw a line from there to where we are, it's an upward line. And by the way, I think in the future, I know in the future, in 2016, God's got more for us than He has had before. You say, Darrell, why do you share all that with me? Here's why. Because as part of our church family, this is just a couple of Sundays ago there, as part of our church family, I know that you have a big, big part to play. I know that maybe God wants to take you on the same kind of journey. Maybe you're seeing like some of your journey in our story. As your story has gone along, maybe there was a place where you kind of took off and I'm gonna do right. I need to change some things. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to turn over a new leaf. And then somewhere in there you got distracted. You know what I'm talking about? You got distracted and you just kind of started drifting away from things you once knew to be true. Things you used to know were right, and some things you used to know were wrong. But it gets so in the press and the busyness of life, things kind of get reoriented and get out of priority focus sometimes. Maybe where you are today is the same place our church has been. Maybe the spot where you're at is a spot where God wants to say to you, it's all about my holiness and in you and my power through you. Right. Maybe God's saying to you, it's time for you to seek after, to hunger and thirst after my righteousness, my holiness in your heart. Maybe God's saying to you, this is a year where you need to take a turn out of the doldrums spiritually and get back on the upward climb. Maybe God's saying to you, this is the year where you need to step up another level. Yes, you've come to know the Lord. Praise God. And by the way, we are seeing that happen. We've been able to baptize Robert and Mike Sims and Sunshine Waller and others even in this past year. It's a beautiful thing. But here's the thing. What's next then for you? You see, it's not leveling off where you learn to love God and you come to church and you worship Him and you become a Christian and God gives you some eternal fire insurance and now you don't have to go to hell. No, this is way bigger of a story than that. This is way more important than that. The benefits and the responsibilities and the joys of the Christian life go way beyond whether or not you go to heaven or hell at the end of this life. You see, there's a world out there who needs to know that Jesus is King and He's worth everything. He's worth living for and He's worth dying for and He's worth serving. Yeah. That He's the treasure in the field. He's the pearl of great price. He is everything you've ever hungered and thirsted for. There's a world out here that needs to know that. You see, they still think that it can be found in a pill bottle. They still think it can be found in a gang. They still think it can be found in a bottle from Liquor Town. They still think it can be found in some other place. But I tell you the truth, only in Jesus Christ only by joining our upward journey toward heaven will they ever know the peace that they're looking for. That's the only way. There's not another option. And so what I'm asking of you today is this. Let's make this year a year where you go to another level. If you're at the love God level, but you're really not connected to anybody else here, it's kind of like I come into church, I wave at a few people, I shake a couple hands, I sing a couple songs, I listen to Darrell yell at me for a little bit, and then I go back home. And the next week, I do it all over again. If that's your experience of church, what I want to tell you is get to the love others level. There's a deeper level. Get connected. Invite somebody over for lunch. Accept somebody's invitation to lunch. Hang around for a little while after church. Get to know people and ask them where they work and how they're... You know why? Because this is too big of a journey to take by yourself. You can't do this by yourself. I need you and you need me and we need each other. I can't be the only person holding all the relational strings of this church. You need to know each other and love each other and get somebody's phone number and ask them if you can call them or text them sometime when you're just to tell them you're praying for them. Get to that from the love God level to the love others level. Climb. Maybe you say, well, I'm pretty well connected. I feel like I know some people. I feel like I've got some friends here, and I feel like well, then maybe the next thing is you need to plug in and get involved. Just a few months ago, weeks ago, I guess, really, Mike Russell came and talked to me. And he's moving the right direction. God is blessing Mike, and he's climbing. Mike brought me a list of things. He said, Darrell, here's some things I'm struggling with. And he wrote at the top, Mike's God list. And he said, would you pray for me about those things right there? Yes, I will. Stuck it to my side of my file cabinet. Mike, I look at that list and I pray for you from time to time. Lord, that you see Mike, and you know what he's working through. You know what he's struggling with. Help him, God. A while back, Mike came to me and said, Darrell, I want to help out with something. I had mentioned that we needed somebody to pick people up on Sunday morning. And Mike said, I want to do that. I want to do that. So guess what? Every Sunday morning, Mike texts me, or Saturday night, he's text or call, hey, anybody, what do we got today? What do we got tomorrow? So what's going on this Sunday morning? About 9:45, he'll show up over here. He'll pick up the church van. He'll go pick people up about 12:30 or so. He'll drive back in after dropping people off. You know what? Mike's making the climb. I just want to give out some roses there and say thank you. Thank you. Because what you do and how you serve, it makes a difference. It makes it to where you're not so self-focused any longer. You're outwardly focused as opposed to inwardly focused. And that makes a huge difference over the course of time. Not only does it bless others in our church, by the way, some of the people that Mike has picked up, I've seen growth in them as well. I've seen some people making progress in people that Mike has picked up, and how he's gotten help people plug in and get connected by bringing them to church. That's great. That's great. So where are you at? Where are you at on the climb? If you are on a downward slide, turn to God and make this year a year of hunger and thirst after Him. In fact, maybe you need to cut some things out of your life. For me, maybe it was partly the making sure I had all those statistics lined out, where I just went down to zero. All we got is zeros from that time period. Maybe for you, it's you need to turn off Facebook. Or maybe it's you need to shut off the TV. Spend some time in prayer. Maybe it's skip a meal. Maybe it's go 15 minutes early to work and quiet your heart and get a little list and put it on the dashboard of your car and pray over that list each day. And pray people you're praying for and things you're asking God to do. Get out of the slide and get back on the climb. Get back on the climb. Well, that's the story of our church. That's the story of our church. But I hope it's also your story in the process. We're a group of people, a family, on the way toward heaven. In the process, we're learning to love God, love others, and serve the world. And we want you to come along. And I think together, we're going to make a real difference in this city over the next 12 months. There's really going to be people whose lives are changed and they're not going to be the same in January of 2017 because of our work together, because of our journey, because of what we do to love God and love others and serve the world. Would you bow your heads with me for prayer?